of the General Committee on Political Affairs and Security. My name is Gustavo Pallares. I'm Deputy Secretary General of the OSCE. I just wanted to make an announcement before the chair starts the meeting. Due to unforeseen circumstances and the situation of the chaos in some of the airports in Europe, part of our interpretation team is not here, so we will have reduced interpretation for this meeting. Please note that we will have interpretation in English, French and Russian and German, and Italian interpretation will be available once the debate on the draft report starts. There will not be Spanish interpretation in this morning's meeting. Please note that this is exceptional situation. It will only apply to this meeting of the committee. For the rest of the meetings of the first committee, we will have the full interpretation. Thank you.
Good morning. Please take your seats. I call the meeting of the General Committee of Political Affairs and Security to order. Welcome, everyone. It is wonderful to be in person and to see all of your smiling faces this early in the morning. I have a few short administrative remarks to begin our meeting. First, I want to remind everyone to silence your mobile phones. Let me also remind everyone who plans to speak from a prepared text to please provide that text to the Secretariat, if at all possible, so that our interpreters will have an easier time. Colleagues, the draft agenda of this meeting has been circulated. Could I please invite you to adopt the agenda? Are there any objections to the adoption of our agenda? See not, the agenda is adopted. Let me formally welcome you all to this meeting of the Committee of Political Affairs and Security. I'm grateful, as usual, to our core staff, Deputy Secretary General Gustavo Pallares and Program Officer Manu Chekersolo Kidonov. Sorry, I'm trying. I will get that, but thank you so much. As well as our procedural advisor for the United Kingdom House of Commons, Katja Cassidy. May I remind colleagues that the election of committee officers for the 29th annual session of the Assembly will take place during the committee's final session, which is likely to take place on Tuesday, 5th of July at 9:00 a.m. Nominations for candidates for election should be handed to the table office no later than 9:00 a.m. on Tuesday morning. The committee is scheduled to meet 4 times during the session. Our first task will be to adopt our rapporteur's report titled Defense of the OSCE Principles and Commitments Amidst Unprecedented Military Hostilities in the OSCE region. We'll also debate and vote on his draft resolution. We have 9 amendments tabled to the draft resolution, which are available outside the room on the documents table as well as on the app. In addition, this committee has been tasked by the Standing Committee to debate and consider 3 supplementary items covering the following issues. First, a draft resolution on victims of terrorism proposed by Mr. Reinhold Lopatka from Austria. Second, a draft resolution on the Arctic region proposed by Mrs. Bryndís Haraldsdóttir from Iceland. And a draft resolution on effective youth engagement towards science, inclusive and democratic societies, proposed by Ms. Farah Karimi from the Netherlands. 5 amendments have been tabled to these supplementary items, which are also available in the usual way. We will consider the supplementary items when our main business on the draft resolution is concluded. Colleagues, I'd like to begin by thanking our host in the UK delegation for welcoming us to this beautiful city of Birmingham and this impressive facility. We know how much work has gone into preparing this event and are grateful to our host, as well as the International Secretariat, for all they have done to prepare for our discussions here. Let me also pause to say how sad I was to hear of the passing of our former president, Ilka Kanerva. He was instrumental in inspiring me to become more engaged in this assembly when I first joined our delegation back in 2015. He will be missed. Colleagues, at the outset of our meeting, I want to address one elephant in the room, or perhaps I should say an elephant that's not in the room. As you're all aware, 2 delegations are not here with us at the annual session this year. As you know, I've always prided myself on being an honest broker as chair of this committee, and I've expressed to you time and again my commitment to providing a forum for all viewpoints that should be at our table. That being said, I'm sure we all understand why these 2 delegations are not here at this annual session. Like many of you, in principle, I would very much like to have Russian and Belarusian perspectives here with us, partaking in this dialogue on the basis of shared principles and shared values. And I can only hope that Moscow and Minsk will make this possible again. They know exactly what cost them their seats in this room, and they know exactly what they must do so that their place here is assured in the future. As a first step, they must end this senseless and tragic war. Colleagues, Russia's brutal attack against Ukraine continues even as we sit here today. Day after day, we bear witness to the cruelty, the barbarity, and the inhumanity of what the Ukrainian people are made to suffer needlessly. The recent barrage of indiscriminate missile strikes by Russia on Ukraine, including an apartment building, churches, schools, and even a crowded shopping mall, are only the latest in a long line of acts of violence perpetrated in this war. This committee and our assembly as a whole have time and again denounced Russia's aggression against Ukraine in very clear terms. Russia's invasion of Ukraine remains a clear, gross, and uncorrected violation of the Helsinki Final Act, a set of principles on which all of our joint work is founded. I fully expect our assembly will once again resoundingly vote to denounce Russia's unacceptable actions and offer our full support to Ukraine's legitimate self-defense while here in Birmingham. But our assembly will also do more. For example, I was very pleased to learn that our president, Margareta Sederfeld, had appointed my friend John Whittingdale, head of the United Kingdom's delegation, as special rapporteur on war crimes in Ukraine. I'm in full agreement that those who conduct war crimes in Ukraine must be held to account, and that the Assembly should fully support this endeavor. I would like Mr. Whittingdale to rest assured that he can count on the support of this committee in his crucial and urgent work. Colleagues, also welcome the appointment of my friend Reinhold Lopatka as the Assembly Special Representative for Parliamentary Dialogue on Ukraine. With one side acting aggressively against the other and threatening only more of the same, there seems to be little space of a productive dialogue in the short term. I am nevertheless grateful that Mr. Lopatka has been willing to take on the challenging task of thinking through what discussion might be possible and productive when Russia's behavior changes. Colleagues, I believe this will be a very productive meeting of our committee. As always, I want to thank my fellow committee officers, Vice President Kostel Donava, and our rapporteur, Laurenas Kashunas, with whom I continue to work very closely. Our rapporteur has drafted a very serious and compelling document on which we will base our work. I want to congratulate him on the excellent draft report and resolution, and look forward to hearing from him very shortly. Finally, I'm pleased to confirm during our time together we will also be honored by the presence of the OSCE Chair in Office, Polish Foreign Minister Zbigniew Rau. Minister Rau and his team have shepherded the OSCE through an extremely challenging time, and I look forward to his views on where the OSCE stands today and how it can be of greatest use to the citizens who have elected us. Colleagues, let me conclude by thanking all of you for being here, for devoting your time and energy to engage in this crucial dialogue at a moment that truly represents a crossroads in our history. I look forward to our exchanges over the next few days and to the good and important work in front of us. Thank you. I would now like to give the floor to the rapporteur of this committee, Mr. Laurenas Kashunas of Lithuania.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, dear Vice Chair of the committee, dear colleagues. A few words about my report and ideas which are now in our draft resolution of our committee. First of all, the main thing, European security is under attack. We face the clash of 2 absolutely different realities. There is one reality, our reality, where democratic values, respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms prevail, where international law is respected and where diplomacy and cooperation are always chosen as the only means to advance countries' foreign policy objectives. Our reality, where millions of people are ready to sacrifice their lives to defend the independence and sovereignty of their country. The people of Ukraine, but also the people of Georgia and the Republic of Moldova have dedicated their lives to fighting for their rights and freedoms, political independence, and the sovereignty and integrity of frontiers of their country. In the meantime, Ukraine is at the front line of this fight. Regretfully, there is another reality, the brutal one, the unlawful reality in which we observe the absolute disregard for human life and human dignity, and the absence of commitment by participating states to the ideas and principles of OSCE. We witness states who choose to entirely reject the fundamental principles of this organization and favor unprovoked war. Within this fragile reality, we witness the perpetration of gross human rights violations, repression of political opposition, and independent civil society, the instrumentalization of migrants, and the utilization of destabilizing cyber and other kinds of hybrid warfare. In order to reconcile these two different realities, there is a need to recommit to OSCE principles, namely in the dimension of political affairs and security, but also to make a very critical assessment of what has led to this situation. With unprecedented and heightened tensions, military aggression, and mounting unconventional threats can be averted only when all OSCE participating states and nations persistently contribute towards upholding the Helsinki principles in full conformity with international law. This may also bring a unique opportunity for us to recharge the OSCE and make it stronger and more efficient, resilient to the attempts by one or two OSCE participating states which are trying to take this organization as a hostage. 2022 has become a repugnant year when the OSCE region was shaken by the eruption of the largest military invasion since World War II. After 8 years of the Russian Federation's occupation and illegal annexation of Crimea and the start of Russia's war against Ukraine, Russia has launched a full-scale war of aggression against Ukraine. And Belarus, another OSCE participating state and neighbor of Ukraine, is shamefully helping Russia in this. Airstrikes have severely hit civilian buildings, schools, and maternity hospitals, nuclear facilities, and many other national critical infrastructures, causing numerous civilian deaths, including children, and displacing millions of people. Each day of a war reveals mounting evidence of new horrific scenes and massive war crimes perpetrated by Russian forces in Bucha, Irpin, Borodyanka, Mariupol, Kramatorsk, and many other Ukrainian cities. We condemn in the strongest terms all acts of war crimes and crimes against humanity committed by the Russian Federation against the people of Ukraine. The Russian Federation should face an international tribunal and accountability mechanisms. We are jointly responsible for how we handle this war and ensure that there is accountability for those states and individuals that commit war crimes and crimes against humanity and attempt to violate the sovereignty and territorial integrity of another state. On this point, I would like to once again reiterate our unwavering support for Ukraine, its independence, its unity, its sovereignty and territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders and territorial waters, and its right to freely pursue and choose its own security arrangements. We will insist that our governments maintain the sanctions regime and our restrictions until the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine is fully restored. Finally, we condemn Belarus, which has also joined Russia's aggressive stance against Ukraine and facilitated this military incursion. I wish to commend the brave people of Russia and Belarus who, despite the threat of long-term imprisonment, apply all means at their disposal to protest against this war by their governments against Ukraine. Russian Federation has persisted in its aggression and violence beyond Ukraine on numerous occasions, which has also culminated in Georgia, bringing devastating consequences to this region and its population. Russia continues to strengthen its military presence in the occupied parts of Georgia and to deepen the de facto integration of these Georgian regions into Russia. This recognition of so-called independence of the occupied territories of Georgia must be reversed. The settlement of Russia-Georgia conflict still requires a balanced approach that rests on the full implementation of the 6-point EU-mediated ceasefire agreement of August 2008. We call on the Russian Federation to bring to an end to its systematic infringements of human rights, fulfill its obligations under the ceasefire agreement, and implement the decision of the European Court of Human Rights of January 2021. With regard to the Transnistrian conflict, attempts to conflict resolution within the 5+2 format have been stalled. Russia's political and economical pressure on the pro-European and pro-reformist government in Chisinau, including by means of energy blackmailing, also played a negative role in this. I also deplore any attempt to destabilize the situation in the Republic of Moldova and to drag this country into Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. Let me use this opportunity to encourage all actors involved in the 5+2 format to engage in the negotiation process at all levels and make the use of collective cooperation within the parameters of comprehensive settlement. On Nagorno-Karabakh, a political solution of post-conflict issues remain to be facilitated, yet relative progress can be seen regarding a number of matters, demonstrated by the exchanges of mind maps and prisoners, the start of discussion on the unblocking of transport links and border delimitation, as well as the establishment of direct line of communication across the line of contact. We, within the OSCE, must call on both sides to work together to settle disputes regarding the demarcation of a border and the restoration of economic and transport links, and desist from any further antagonistic incitements that would hinder such cooperation. Issues regarding border security affect all of us. While it is imperative to respect the population's right to seek asylum, the OSCE must swiftly and efficiently respond to growing cross-border threats, whether that be the re-emergence of transnational organized crime, the export of radicalization and violent extremism, the illicit trafficking of drugs and weapons, or the shameful instrumentalization of illegal migrants. The situation at the border between Belarus and EU member states is far from being normalized, despite commendable efforts by Latvian, Lithuanian, and Polish governments. We once again urge Belarus to stop instrumentalizing illegal migrants for political purposes and to start implementing their respective international commitments with regards to border security and management, including those undertaking OSCE in the OSCE spirit. On numerous occasions over the last few years, we have witnessed how offensive hybrid strategies were orchestrated across and against OSCE participating states. These strategies range from the weaponizing of energy flows, illicit financial operations, and subversion of independent political and social organizations to attempts to engineer migrants' crisis at OSCE borders, disruptive cyber attacks against critical infrastructure, and proliferation of disinformation operations. In particular, cyber intrusion of critical and civilian infrastructure remains one of the most prevailing components of any modern warfare. Perpetrators targeted financial entities, telecommunication systems, oil and energy companies, military intelligence units, healthcare facilities, railway stations, and election systems. This is a few things which I would like to mention today on our security picture. But in conclusion, I want to urge the OSCE executive structures to employ all existing mechanisms to jointly act in this decisive moment for the whole OSCE region, where can never be too many efforts to end the war and to preserve peace, no matter how fragile it is. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laurenis, for that excellent report. The floor is now open for debate. The time limit for speeches is 4 minutes. If there are any members wishing to speak, I may reduce or if there are too many members, I may reduce the time limit to try to accommodate as many speakers as possible. The speakers list for this debate is now closed. As has become my practice, I will begin by giving the floor to our Vice Chair, Mr. Dunaba. You are recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Hassan. I would like to congratulate you also for your good job, which you did at our committee until now, and for leading us. And I hope that you will lead us as well until now in the future also. I would like also to congratulate Lorinas for the extensive report of our committee. The current regional context is very complex. We need to be realistic about the security situation on the ground in Ukraine. Unfortunately, despite Ukrainian heroism, Russia has made strategic territorial gains in Ukraine. Russia's war in Ukraine is not only aimed at Russian-speaking areas, but also at altering European and regional security. In the short term, we need to support Ukraine to resist in the east and push Russia back. In the long term, we need to think of a way to stop Russia to be able to initiate such action again. In terms of regional security, Romania, a country on the border with Ukraine and only 44 kilometers from the conflict zone, is particularly concerned about developments in this area. Romania has condemned in the strongest possible terms the unjustified and unprovoked Russian aggression on Ukraine. My country is very active in the region. Our leaders have been in Ukraine and met President Zelensky a couple of weeks ago. And I recently returned from a common meeting of the Moldavian and Romanian parliament in Chișinău. The authorities and population have expressed their full support for our neighbors. We see that the Republic of Moldova and Georgia are already vulnerable and under direct threat of aggression from Moscow. They need the support of the international organizations to ensure and promote stability and peace in the region. I think our decisions will influence our common future in the OSCE region. Thank you all, and I do hope this annual session will further contribute to the good in our region.
Thank you very much. I will now recognize Ms. Haraldsdóttir of Iceland. You have the floor. Would you like the floor?
No, sorry, I'm not prepared.
Okay, we will move right along to Mr. Guliev of Azerbaijan. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me thank our distinguished rapporteur, Mr. Laurinis Kashinis, for his comprehensive and meaningful report to bring many challenging issues into attention of our Assembly. I will focus on the part of the report dedicated to ensuring security and stability in the South Caucasus. I very much appreciate that Rapporteur Kashinis refers to the trilateral statement signed on 10 November 2020, which provides a clear guidance for attaining sustainable peace, security, and stability in our region. Confidence-building measures, the limitation of the state border, the restoration of economic and transport links are indispensable elements for normalizing relations, consolidating lasting peace and security, as well as ensuring sustainable development and cooperation in the South Caucasus region. Azerbaijan has presented to Armenia 5 basic principles, which in essence constitute a roadmap for signing peace agreement on establishment of interstate relations. By these principles, Azerbaijan clearly expressed its good intention to Armenia and the international community, and most importantly, demonstrated its respect for international law. It is a welcome sign that Armenia reacted to this proposal in a positive way. The Brussels Peace Agenda has been recently established upon the initiative of EU Council President Charles Michel, and Armenia and Azerbaijan agreed to advance discussions on the future peace agreement with the mediation of the European Union. Polish OSCE chairmanship has officially declared its firm support to EU-mediated meetings of both leaders and welcomed the process towards possible peace agreement. At the last Brussels meeting on 22 May, the leaders of Azerbaijan and Armenia agreed to finalize the establishment of their national commissions for border delimitation and conduct the first meeting on the state border. The sides also agreed on establishing a working group led by foreign ministers of both countries on the preparation for negotiations on peace treaty. It also should be mentioned that both leaders agreed to meet again in Brussels in the same format by July or August this year to assess the achieved progress and discuss the next steps. It is worth mentioning that right after 2 days, on May 24, the first meeting of the Commission on Border Delimitation between Azerbaijan and Armenia, chaired by the Deputy Prime Ministers, took place on the Armenia-Azerbaijan state border. This gave a positive impetus to the process. Azerbaijan assessed the outcomes of the Brussels meetings with cautious optimism and hopes that the agreements reached at the meeting will be implemented and pave the way for moving forward with the normalization agenda. Any delays in this direction or reviving outdated and dangerous narratives, making false promises, undertaking provocative and revenge steps may drag the region into a new crisis, risk, and confrontation. The only way forward is to consolidate peace in the region based on the fundamental principles of international law and the OSCE principles and commitments. At this critical juncture, we as parliamentarians should support this process and refrain from actions or statements that hinder the sensitive process of normalization and deepen the divides in the region. In that context, as a rapporteur correctly mentioned in his report, we should desist from any further antagonist incitement that would hinder cooperation in the region and building peace. I will call on parliamentarians to support the draft resolution as it was presented by the rapporteurs. Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. I will now recognize Mr. Unila of Finland. Sir, you have the floor. I will recognize Ms. Charlotte Lambadis from Cyprus. You have the floor.
Thank you. It's nice to be at last here after we stuck in the airports. Dear colleagues, the Russian invasion of Ukraine poses new threats and challenges for the global community. The escalation of crisis should alarm all humanity. I underline our solidarity towards the Ukrainian people. Ukrainian refugees have found shelter also in Cyprus. 200,000 Cypriot refugees in 1974 experienced the same cruelty. So we know the suffering, the pain, the agony, and that's why we do our best to make them feel welcome and protected. Ukraine's sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders is indisputable. We have aligned with collective sanctions against Russia. We have supported the European perspective to Ukraine and Moldova, as well as Georgia, in line with the criteria and process provided for by the EU institutions. Because a firm commitment to the principles of international law, to European principles and values, and to humanitarian law and human rights is of utmost importance. should be for all of us. Revisionism and expansionism claims are a threat to our rules-based international order and must be addressed with resolve. Talking of international violations, some strong examples include Crimea, Donbass, Mariupol, Luhansk, the provocations against the Greek islands of Aegean and Varosha. All above cases and many more must be addressed with resolve. Among us, the OSCE members, there are countries that refuse to align with sanctions against Russia. They call Russian businessmen to establish their businesses in the country, all under the pretext of being a neutral mediator, undermining the intended impact of sanctions, the collective response to the ongoing Russian aggression in Ukraine. That's provocative to other countries, which pay high risk cost by adopting all necessary sanctions against Russia. The concept of defense and security is more important than ever due to the geopolitical developments following the Russian invasion in Ukraine. That's why Sweden and Finland sought participation in NATO. NATO needs strong, united allies and certainly cannot afford disputes among them. Crises and threats in the Eastern Mediterranean Sea movements that escalate aggression and create hostility should not take place. And this is NATO's job to put an end to it. Hostile behavior, provocation must stop. Let's unite all of us and face the aggressor. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now recognize Mr. Samharadze from Georgia. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The Black Sea security landscape has dramatically shifted since Russia's occupation of Georgian territories in 2008, the illegal annexation of Crimea in 2014, and full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. This invasion is taking hundreds of lives and is violating all the fundamental principles of international law. Serving as a link between the Caspian, Aegean, and Mediterranean bases, as well as corridor to the Middle East, the Black Sea has always been an important region for Russia. However, Russia's aggression is more evident today when the whole Black Sea is surrounded by Russia's military strongholds now, be it in South Caucasus, in Ukraine, or in Moldova. It is clear that the above-mentioned strong military presence, which is accompanied by war and aggressive political steps also, Moscow seeks to transform the Black Sea into internal waterways where Russia can have the kind of freedom of action. This circumstance reduces perspective of transit projects, economic cooperation, and freedom of navigation in the Black Sea, and increases Russia's access to important regional energy and transport infrastructure corridors. This will have a negative political outcome and will significantly affect long-term security and stability of Europe. The current situation in the peace process in the Black Sea region cannot be explained through the prism of bilateral relations of Russia with Ukraine or of Russia with Georgia. Without seeing in a wider context the entire Black Sea region and the eastern flank of Europe, we will find wrong conclusions. It should be mentioned that consolidated international diplomatic pressure on Russia and sanctions regime would serve as a deterrent factor for Russia and would make tremendous deterrence. Our partners in Europe and the US should further strengthen their leadership and take decisive steps to counter the ongoing occupations in the Black Sea region, Georgia and Ukraine, keeping the issue always very high on the European security agenda, because the significance of the Black Sea region in the global political environment is likely to rise in the coming months and years. Vast energy and transport corridors concentrated in the Caspian region open new opportunities for cooperation between energy producer, transit, and consumer countries, whereas the European Union also seeks to decrease its dependence on the Russian hydrocarbons. NATO and the EU enlargement process is also a very powerful tool to foster peace and security in Europe. The so-called gray zones will lead to more ambiguity and uncertainty and stimulate Russia for more aggressive steps. Western democracies, United States, the EU and NATO, as the global players, now more than ever, need more presence in the region to secure their various vital interests, including rules-based international order and Euro-Atlantic security. One of the most effective deterrence factors will be also active US and Western engagement with Georgia and in the region to not only address those compounding threats, but to also safeguard democracy in the region. The main question to answer now is what can we do together with our American and European partners to contain Russia's expansionism, address other threats on the horizon, and ensure stability and security in this strategically important region. And we believe one of the answers to those challenges could be Georgia's and Ukraine's membership to NATO. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'll now recognize Ms. Boniface from Canada. You have the floor.
Fellow parliamentarians, Russia's illegal and brutal aggression against Ukraine violates international law, the United Nations Charter, and the Helsinki Final Act. Russia's aggression is also in direct contravention of the 1994 Budapest Memorandum, a key instrument aimed at assuring Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Under the terms of the memorandum, Ukraine agreed to relinquish its nuclear arsenal, then the world's third largest, and transfer all nuclear warheads to Russia for decommissioning. It did so in exchange for security assurances, including from Russia, that its independence, sovereignty, and existing borders would be respected. Russia's violation of the Budapest Memorandum displays its utter and ongoing contempt for multilateral agreements and international law. Most concerning, since this further invasion of Ukraine began, Russian leaders, including President Putin, have made threatening statements about increasing the readiness of its nuclear forces. These threats directly contravene a joint statement signed by Russia and the other permanent members of the UN Security Council in January 2022, 1 month before the invasion. In that statement, the 5 permanent members jointly stated that a nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought. The statement echoed the declaration by US President Ronald Reagan and the Soviet General Secretary Mikhail Gorbachev at their Geneva summit meeting in 1985. Russia's threatening nuclear rhetoric is incredibly dangerous and destabilizing. Not only do these threats risk normalizing nuclear brinkmanship, but they also increase the risk of nuclear war, whether through escalation, accident, or miscalculation. Russia's threats also call into question the future of nuclear nonproliferation and disarmament. Colleagues, Russia's war on Ukraine represents a significant breakdown for regional security. The multilateral system has come under increasing strain. There is an urgent need to strengthen the structures that uphold peace and manage conflict. Russia's aggression against Ukraine comes at a significant moment for the global nonproliferation and nuclear disarmament movement. Next month, the states parties to the Treaty on Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons will meet in New York for the 10th Review Conference. This will be the first review conference in 7 years, and it provides an important opportunity to strengthen commitments around nuclear risk reduction. Now, more than ever, OSCE participating states need to recommit to the principles of the NPT. States parties to the NPT have an obligation to end the nuclear arms race and pursue negotiations in good faith on nuclear disarmament. As of early this year, it is estimated that there are more than 12,000 nuclear warheads in the world. Nuclear weapons threaten current and future generations and have no place in our world. Firmly believe we must revitalize the NPT obligations and resume with urgency our efforts to eliminate these weapons of mass destruction. Dear colleagues, as the world's largest regional security organization, the OSCE has a critical role to play in strengthening arms control regimes and confidence-building measures. The work is especially critical during this time of crisis. As parliamentarians, we can help to build the political will necessary to strengthen both non-proliferation and disarmament frameworks. In this regard, I call on all OSCE participating states to condemn Russia's threatening nuclear rhetoric and bullying, reinforce norms against the use of nuclear weapons, and recommit to creating a nuclear weapon-free world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll now recognize Mr. Wicker from the United States.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to begin my remarks this morning by quoting from the great author Leo Tolstoy, the one we all studied in school, who, like many of his courageous countrymen today, understood the dangers of despotism and tried to warn us about them. Speaking of tyrants, Leo Tolstoy said, and I quote, "We must explain to them, the tyrants, that they themselves are murderers, and above all, we must not permit them to kill people. We must refuse to kill people by their command. Common men are so hypnotized that they see and do not understand the significance of what is constantly done to them." In essence, Tolstoy was saying that tyrants thrive on manipulating others to do their bidding. They manipulate others to suffer, others to fight, and even die to expand the tyrant's power, while these people think they are serving a higher cause. This is the core lesson of Leo Tolstoy's greatest works, War and Peace, Thou Shalt Not Kill, and ironically, How Much Land Does a Man Need? It is as though he wrote them for such a time as this. Like the tyrants of Tolstoy's time, Mr. Putin's propaganda machine exists for one purpose: to pacify and manipulate the Russian people to do his bidding. It insists that Russia had no choice but to launch an all-out war on its neighbor, Ukraine, and on other neighbors. That is a lie in the service of one man's thirst for power. Almost all the remainder of the OSCE participating states are heeding Leo Tolstoy's wisdom. And many people within Belarus and Russia are heeding that also. We're united against Moscow's lies, and we stand in solidarity with our friends. Mikita Poturyov and the rest of the Ukrainian delegation gather here today. The Ukrainian people have courageously chosen to defend their land, and many others have spoken out against this tyranny. People like Alexei Navalny, Vladimir Karamurza, and Nemtsov before them, like Svetlana Tikhanovskaya of Belarus. In this, they are defending not only their homelands, but the very principles on which global security is built: sovereignty, independence, and democracy. The United States and its allies are committed to strengthening Ukraine's ability to repel their invaders. Earlier this week, the American delegation convened a summit on Black Sea security in Constanța, Romania, for the Helsinki Commission's first ever multilateral dialogue among partners. We discussed the importance of Black Sea regional security, along with the Romanian Foreign Minister, the Chief Defense Staff, a Deputy Secretary General of NATO, the Director of Exercise and Assessments of the U.S. European Command, the Minister of Defense of Ukraine, the First Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Georgia, and a Bulgarian member of Parliament. Along with the other members of the U.S. delegation here today, we discussed concrete ways to confront Russian aggression. This committee today is continuing to do so. As we do so, let us stand more united than ever with our partners across Europe as we work to restore peace through strength. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll now recognize Mr. Midiu from Albania. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. While we are speaking here, brave women and men are losing their lives in the middle of Europe while defending not just their country and their liberty, but also they are defending the values of Europe. Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine is a turning point of our global order. War and violence as an instrument to pursue illegal political goals have returned to our reality. They remind us of the darkest hours of European history. It is now on us to stand united, not just to support Ukraine, but win the war together with them. It happens I was defense minister in 2007 in Munich Security Conference when Putin came out strong saying that NATO is our adversary, is a threat to them, and they will not allow enlargement to Georgia and Ukraine and consider Balkans as a backyard of Russia. So let me just get to what's going on in the Balkans, which is also a concern as Europe is threatened. I think also Balkan is under threat and will have the implications with what's going on in Ukraine. Russia and China have penetrated a lot in recent years in the Balkans. They've extended their influence through military presence, intelligence presence, media, and other ways and means, and especially influencing the economy. We have issues in the dormant ethnic conflicts which are pumping up. We have a kind of arm race which is started now with support of Russia and China. We have issues in Bosnia and Herzegovina, a status quo of dialogue between Serbia and Kosovo, issues of religion differences and disputes in Montenegro, and last was the enlargement fatigue with a decision not to give the status to Albania and to Macedonia. Saying all of that, let me move to the subject of the discussion of the amendment. I put it yesterday. While all the countries have been quick to impose economic sanctions on Russia, following its invasion of Ukraine, the Chinese government has been keen to stress that normal trade relations with Russia will continue. They are trying to fill the gap. Chinese firms have stepped in to replace service previously offered by other companies. They have suspended their operations in Russia. For example, include China state-owned Union Pay has replaced MasterCard and Visa, and Chinese military-linked technology giant Huawei making rapid market gains following the withdrawal of Apple and Samsung. They are deepening energy ties when they signed the agreement, Russia and China, for $117.5 billion to build a pipeline that connects two countries. Also, they are trying to close the back door. Democratic states should establish mechanism to identify and impose sanctions to all the countries, as I asked yesterday, that are violating the sanctions, international sanctions in Russia. So this is not just an Ukrainian war. This is for stability and security in Europe, and we have to stand firm together to win this war together with our friends from Romania. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now recognize Mr. Eduard Agajanyan from Armenia. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Indeed, there is a peace process and meetings of different formats between Armenian and Azerbaijani officials. But I'm afraid so far the process hasn't merged into anything other than staying a process. I'm glad that my colleague from Azerbaijan refers to international law, because it completely opposes the stance of their president, who says that international law is dead. Unfortunately, as Mr. Kashunas rightly mentioned, there are still a number of outstanding issues that wait to be resolved. With all due respect towards the honorable rapporteur, I would like to stress that the Armenian side has handed in all the landmines under its possession to Azerbaijan, whereas at the same time, there are still 38 prisoners of war kept as hostages in Azerbaijani prisons, which are used as bargaining chips in the above-mentioned peace process to gain whatever political advantage over Armenia. The aggressive rhetoric of the president of Azerbaijan, the continuous acts of ethnic cleansing of the people of Nagorno-Karabakh through physical or psychological harassment, as well as the narrative of the so-called Zangezur corridor, which in practice means an exterritorial corridor passing through the sovereign territory of Armenia, overall do not help the decrease of the tensions either. Dear colleagues, the full-scale war has stopped on November 9, 2020, but the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict still awaits its comprehensive and final resolution, and this Parliamentary Assembly should play its crucial role in this process. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now recognize Mr. Sanikis from Cyprus. You have the floor. We will now recognize Mr. Basir from Turkey. You have the floor.
Sayın Başkan, değerli meslektaşlarım, öncelikle kapsamlı raporu için raportöre teşekkür ediyorum. Rusya Federasyonu'nun Ukrayna'ya karşı 24 Şubat'ta başlattığı savaş, Avrupa güvenliği için olağanüstü bir sınamadır.
Distinguished Chair, distinguished members, thanks very much for the reports. First of all, I would like to say that this Russian aggression against Ukraine is a huge challenge in the face of the challenges and difficulties that are now being faced by the architecture of European security.
Türkiye bu zorlu dönemde Ukrayna'nın yanındadır. Ukrayna'nın bağımsızlığını, toprak bütünlüğünü ve egemenliği güçlü bir şekilde destekliyoruz.
Turkey is standing in solidarity with Ukraine and we fully support the independence and sovereignty of Ukrainian country.
Ülkemiz Montreux Sözleşmesi'ni lafzına ve ruhuna uygun ve hassas bir şekilde uyguluyor. Bugün çatışmalar Karadeniz'de daha fazla yayılmadıysa bu Türkiye'nin izlediği sorumlu tutum sayesindedir.
Turkey is following the principles of the Montreux Agreement, and if this conflict hasn't spread further away, this was thanks to the responsible attitude of the Turkish government.
Ukrayna'daki durum Montreux Sözleşmesi'nin önemini bir kez daha ortaya koydu.
And the situation in Ukraine has once again demonstrated the importance of the Montreux Agreement.
Türkiye aynı zamanda savaşın sona ermesi için yoğun çaba sarf ediyor.
Turkey is making a lot of efforts to end the war.
Sayın Cumhurbaşkanımız hem Ukraynalı hem Rus muhataplarıyla sık sık temas halindeler.
And our president is in continuous contact with the authorities both in Ukraine and in Russia.
Müzakere edilmiş, adil ve kalıcı bir barış arzu ediyoruz.
We demand a negotiated, a just peace.
Taraflarca talep edildiği takdirde bu doğrultuda kolaylaştırıcı rolümüzü sürdüreceğiz.
And we will continue to be working as a facilitator as long as the parties demand that.
Öte yandan bu gelişmelerden ötürü Avrupa güvenlik mimarisi de zarar gördü.
On the other hand, the security architecture of Europe has been deeply harmed because of these developments.
Avrupa güvenlik mimarisinin ve AGİT'in rolünün nasıl güçlendirileceği konusundaki istişareleri, koşullar izin verdiğinde yeniden canlandırmalıyız.
We have to start once again with the negotiations regarding the European security architecture as much as the conditions allow us.
Avrupa'daki istikrar ve güvenliği ciddi şekilde tehdit eden yeni tehditlere karşı karşıya kalırken egemenlik, eşitlik, tehdit ve güç kullanımından kaçınma, toprak bütünlüğüne saygı dahil olmak üzere AGİT ilke ve taahhütlerinin tam olarak uygulanması çağrımızı yeniliyoruz.
In the face of these challenges, we would like to repeat our call to respect the principles of the OSCE, like sovereignty, refraining from threat or use of violence, and such things alike.
Avrupa güvenliği mimarisinin karşılaştığı bu sınamalar karşısında tüm AGİT katılımcı devletlerinin işbirliği ve istikrarı öne çıkaran bir tutum içinde olmaları gerekmektedir.
OSCE member states have to take a position that highlights the cooperation and stability in the face of the challenges faced by the security architecture of Europe.
Bu bağlamda ima dahi olsa tüm tarafların dar siyasi çıkarlar için kışkırtıcı üsluptan kaçınılması ihtiyacı bulunmaktadır.
Under these conditions, there is a need for all parties to refrain from using provocative languages.
Türkiye, Ege ve Doğu Akdeniz'de dahil olmak üzere tüm meselelerin diyalog ve işbirliği yoluyla çözümünden yanadır.
Turkey is in favor of solving all the problems in the Aegean and Eastern Mediterranean part of the world within peaceful negotiations.
Ancak bu tutumumuz muhataplarımız tarafından karşılık görememektedir.
But unfortunately, this attitude is not peacefully replied by our counterparts.
Kuzey Kıbrıs Türk Cumhuriyeti hükümeti Maraş'ın üzerinde tam yetki ve kontrole sahiptir bölgenin geleceğine dair karar verecek tek makam olduğunu, Kuzey Kıbrıs Türk Cumhuriyeti olduğunu belirtmek isterim. Teşekkür ederim.
Northern Cyprus Turkish Republic is the only authority that has a word on Maraş, and it has the only power to make a decision in this region. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll now recognize Ms. Boyer from France. Ms. Boyer, you have the floor.
Şimdi Fransa'dan Boyer'a veriyorum sözü.
Merci, mes chers collègues. Nous nous sommes tous émus à juste titre des conséquences de l'invasion russe en Ukraine, mais un autre conflit mérite notre compassion et notre appui. Je veux parler de la guerre asymétrique qui a opposé l'Arménie à l'Azerbaïdjan alors que nous étions en plein confinement. Permettez-moi de rappeler les bombes à sous-munitions, les bombes au phosphore, le nettoyage ethnique et les menaces quotidiennes contre les frontières de la République d'Arménie. On a beaucoup parlé à juste titre des souffrances des Ukrainiens et des Ukrainiennes. Permettez-moi d'évoquer celles des Arméniens, de la petite Arménie, et notamment des mères et des femmes arméniennes qui ont perdu à la fois un père et leur fils et leur mari. Pour que l'on puisse parler et avancer avec sérénité et en toute bonne foi, plusieurs questions doivent être abordées avec transparence. La question de l'eau, la question des prisonniers, la question des disparus qui est toujours pendante et la protection du patrimoine culturel et cultuel. Et les missions de l'UNESCO doivent être favorisées, ce qui n'est pas le cas aujourd'hui. C'est une nécessité. Ce n'est pas une provocation de l'évoquer, mais c'est une nécessité absolue. La solidarité que nous exprimons avec l'Ukraine ne doit pas nous faire oublier combien il est nécessaire aujourd'hui de soutenir la petite Arménie. Je vous remercie.
Thank you. I will recognize Ms. Kravchuk from Ukraine. You have the floor.
Thank you, dear colleagues. I know that a lot of you already came to Ukraine even during this full-scale invasion, and I really thank you for this courage. But I think that you need to understand that it is a full-scale war in the 21st century, though it's difficult to imagine. So I decided to bring a little piece of this war here to Birmingham. This is the striking element from Iskander missile. When missile hits the ground, these metal cubes are, flying around on a high speed and can kill a person. It can cover the square meters of 2 football fields. This piece gave my husband, he's head of Department of Police in Kyiv region, in Boryspil. You probably know because if you flew to Ukraine before, it's where the airport is. So he picked it up from the ground in March and gave it to me and said, you are going places, you talk to people, you talk to politicians, please show how they are killing us with this. And when I ask myself, why Russia does that? Why it's bombing? Why did Putin bomb my hometown, a small town in western Ukraine, and send 4 caliber missiles to residential area? And the very simple answer to this question is because he can, because Russia can, and no one can stop it. Only Ukraine is fighting right now, being a shield to Europe, to the whole world. Our people are dying every day, just in this moment. Every morning of every person in our Ukrainian delegation starts that we check the news. How many more people were killed in this war of aggression? So I really address you also as members of national parliaments. Do what you can. Ask yourself what you can do to help Ukraine to win. It will be our mutual victory. We will celebrate it together on other annual meetings of OSCE. But we need to understand that we have to be courageous, brave, and to stand up. You probably know that OSCE had to close the mission. It had to close all the projects that it does in Ukraine because Russia put a veto on it. Do we want to be in such organization that cannot do anything with this? That's why I ask you to support later on in Rules and Procedure Committee the amendment that can give us a process how to get rid of a delegation of the country that is an aggressor, is killing people. Also, I ask you to think about that there will be no lasting peace without justice. We need to bring these violators, gross violators of human rights, to the court. We need international tribunal to make sure that this evil will not go unpunished, because it will return. And to conclude with, I would just want to remind you that pleasing the aggressor does not work with it. Saying that we just need a dialogue because dialogue works with civilized countries, it doesn't work with Russia. We need to secure victory of Ukraine on the battlefield and then drag Russia to the negotiation table together. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. I will now recognize Ms. Gauston of Armenia. You have the floor.
Honorable Chair, dear colleagues, Armenia acceded to the OSCE motivated by the goals and purposes of the organization as well as by the principles of the UN Charter. We were convinced that our commitment is being shared by all member countries and double standards have no place in an organization with an undeniable reputation. Unfortunately, this reputation was shattered when faced with the reality. The OSCE was unable to condemn the aggression unleashed by Azerbaijan and Turkey and its backed terrorist fighters in the fall of 2020. It remained silent to the racially motivated crimes by Azerbaijan with the use of chemical weapons and cluster munitions against the peaceful population of Nagorno-Karabakh. The November 9th ceasefire stopped the bloodshed in Nagorno-Karabakh, but contrary to the Azerbaijani claims, the conflict is not over. In fact, the security challenges in Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh have increased and are no less important than those in Eastern Europe. During the so-called peacetime, the Armenian side had more than 120 casualties. Azerbaijan is repeatedly making territorial claims against Armenia, conducting a policy of ethnic cleansing, misappropriation and destruction of cultural and historical monuments, and continuing the aggressive rhetoric and hatred towards Armenia and Armenians. No one should be under any illusion that the results of the use of force could ever become the basis of sustainable peace. Any agreement under force and against the will of the people cannot guarantee against new confrontations and aggression. The right of an entire nation to life and self-determination cannot be sacrificed to geopolitical or economic interests. Armenians that have survived the first genocide of the 20th century have vivid memories of the dire consequences of such calculations. In this context, the co-chair countries of the OSCE group should reaffirm their commitment to resume negotiations on a comprehensive resolution of the conflict based on the principle of self-determination. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now recognize Mr. Guliev from Azerbaijan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dear colleagues, with the signing of the trilateral statement by the leaders of Azerbaijan, Russia, and Armenia, almost 3-decade-long armed conflict and the Armenian aggression against Azerbaijan has been ended, and Azerbaijan has entered into a new stage, which is the stage of peace, reconciliation, and confidence building. And of course, it's very disappointing to hear some members of this assembly still thinking in revanchist terms, feeding these revanchist ideas in order to restart a new war in the region. Of course, we are facing in our continent the crisis, the biggest crisis since the end of the Second World War. And it's now time to think, calling for reconciliation and trying to come up with the efforts bringing together the nations in terms of peaceful coexistence. And it's very high time that Armenia and Azerbaijan came together in order to talk about the peace and reconciliation. But unfortunately, this kind of rhetoric by members of Armenian delegation do not help at all. International law was dead, of course, during the 3 decades of Armenian aggression. But what we have done, we have ended and we have deoccupied our lands, and we have revived international law. And we have, of course, ended the illegal occupation. And there is no such an artificial entity which is called Nagorno-Karabakh in Azerbaijan. We have Karabakh region of Azerbaijan. And by the way, I represent, as the member of parliament, I represent the city of Khankandi in Karabakh region. And half of my constituency are Armenians. And of course, as a member of Azerbaijani parliament, I try to make sure that all the rights and duties and obligations of the population living in the Karabakh region of Azerbaijan as ethnic Armenians and as Azerbaijani citizens have been fully guaranteed and ensured. And of course, Azerbaijan will try and will do all of its efforts in order to make sure that all Azerbaijani citizens enjoy the same rights. And we are multicultural, multi-ethnic country, and we are very proud of it. Unlike Armenia, which is a mono-ethnic country, and there is no, of course, we have seen during the history so many ethnic cleansing happening in Armenia. And now Armenia becoming mono-ethnic nation, mono-ethnic country, it's of course, against logic that Armenia claims vice versa and distorts the situation in the region. Azerbaijan, again, has a pride history of multiculturalism, multi-religion. We have so many different ethnic groups living there. And of course, in Karabakh region of Azerbaijan, again, we have Armenians living there as Azerbaijani citizens. And they have been part of Azerbaijan for many years, and they will be part of Azerbaijan in the future. And when we are talking about the Karabakh region, when we are talking about the Armenians living in Karabakh as Azerbaijani citizens, it is our internal issue. And we will not allow nor Armenia, neither any part, the third party, to meddle with the internal affairs of Azerbaijan, because we have a constitution of Azerbaijan, we have legislation providing all rights, guaranteeing the rights of all people living in Azerbaijan. And I would like to thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Dear friends, we have 4 speakers left, and our time is getting near, and so I'm going to reduce the speaking time down to 3 minutes for our last 4 speakers. And I will now recognize Mr. Leconte from France. Sir, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je voulais d'abord témoigner et dire à la délégation ukrainienne qu'il n'y a pas une journée, il n'y a pas une heure depuis le 24 février où nous avons la conviction que l'Ukraine est aujourd'hui finalement ceux qui se battent pour la défense du droit international et de la liberté en Europe et dans le monde. Et je le dis, et j'en pense aussi aux centaines de milliers d'Ukrainiens qui sont déportés en Russie, en particulier des enfants, et que nous devons toujours avoir en tête, et qui témoignent que lorsque le droit international se repose sur un seul pays pour être défendu, lorsqu'il est faible, lors de l'agression de l'Arménie en 2020, lors du départ précipité de l'Afghanistan et l'arrivée des talibans en 2021, à chaque fois que le droit international montre des faiblesses, c'est une incitation de plus à aller vers la déstabilisation. Et si je le dis là, c'est parce que comme notre rapport le précise, cette agression russe remet en cause fondamentalement un droit international dont nous avons besoin, même lorsque nous vivons en paix, pour faire face aux défis mondiaux. Mais je voudrais souligner l'inquiétude que nous devons tous avoir et qui a été signalée par notre collègue du Canada sur la question de la prolifération nucléaire. Je vous rappelle quand même qu'à Budapest, en 1994, la Russie, les États-Unis, la Grande-Bretagne, la France et la Chine ensuite, se sont engagés à respecter l'indépendance et la souveraineté de l'Ukraine dans ses frontières existantes de 1994. Lorsque l'on voit que la dénucléarisation de l'Ukraine et son adhésion à la TNP la mettent aujourd'hui en danger, c'est l'ensemble de la prolifération nucléaire dans le monde qui est mis en cause, l'ensemble de cette politique de non-prolifération qui est remis en cause par ce que nous constatons depuis l'agression russe vis-à-vis de l'Ukraine. Nous en constatons aussi les effets avec l'impossibilité d'arriver à un accord avec l'Iran. Et je voulais signaler combien cette situation était préoccupante et devait nous mobiliser pour la non-prolifération nucléaire, mais aussi nous mobiliser pour aider l'Ukraine, accompagner l'Ukraine, combattre avec elle jusqu'à sa victoire.
Thank you. I will now recognize Mr. Karaoglu from Greece. You have the floor.
Honorable Mr. President, honorable colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I want to speak about the statement of the Turkish delegation about the existence of a state named Democracy of North Cyprus. That state is not exist. It's not recognized from all the countries in all over the world, from European Union, from NATO, from United Nations, and we cannot understand why the Turkish delegation made such a provocation today. In that area, in Cyprus, there is only an area which is 40% of Cyprus democracy, which is under occupation of the Turkish arms from 1974. And that is something the Turkish delegation knows that. Now, allow me to highlight how important it is for the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe member states delegation to be able to meet again face-to-face. Of course, the pandemic is still here. We all want to leave it behind us, but it is still here, and we need to be very careful so that we can balance well between normality and loosen restrictions. Now, it is even more important to be able to discuss face-to-face because in an uncertain geostrategic field, as it is being formed after the invasion of Russia to Ukraine, direct communication is needed more than ever. What is also needed more than ever is stability, soundness of mind, consistency, solidarity, and honesty among us. So, as member states of the organization, we are adequate for the challenges of today, but also of the ones that are yet to come. After all the parliamentary delegation, we are part of a certain political and cultural system, and we share the same values. Nevertheless, it is obvious that the situation in Ukraine functions as a catalyst of developments. We, Greece, we have our eyes turned on Ukraine, but at the same time, we have our attention turned on countries who maintain and upgrade their aggressive speech against other countries, creating every day a new story to maintain tensions in the southeastern Europe in high levels. For example, all of you have heard the statements of a high-ranking official of a country member of the organization that his country cannot be limited in their own borders, or even the overt intervention of the president of the country of the southeastern Europe in our national political life by asking the Greek people to punish our current government. Unfortunately, by this aggressive speech, it is clear that even today there are states who behave as revisional power and practice their international affairs as a transaction.
Thank you.
I'm closing. They pretend to be the official mediator while aiming on specific geopolitical targets. Nevertheless, nobody must forget that historically nobody who remained neutral, no matter how much of an expert they think they are, never have they gained more than the ones who stood at the right side of history. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you. I'll now recognize Mr. Sinekis from Cyprus.
Dear Chairman, let me first refer to the so-called Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus is completely out of order. It's an illegal entity not recognized by the international community. Dear colleagues, the ongoing war in Ukraine is causing tectonic shifts in the international system. The regional subsystem of Eastern Mediterranean is significantly affected. During this time of heightened tensions, Turkey has been a destabilizing factor, a disruptive force whose revisionist and aggressive acts give rise to additional tensions and hinder cooperation. The ongoing violation of airspace of Greece, the unfounded claims on Greek islands, and the inflammatory statements of Turkish officials are only a few of the most recent examples. We underline our great concern about the situation in the Aegean, and we express our full support to Greece. Regarding my country, Cyprus, Turkey continues unabated its illegal actions in Cyprus' exclusive economic zone and on the ground. The gradual opening by Turkey of the fenced-off area of the occupied town of Famagusta for exploitation is in total breach of UN Security Council resolutions 550 and 789, calling for the return of the lawful inhabitants of Famagusta under UN administration. Turkey and its subordinate illegal entity in the occupied area insist in their claim for a two-state solution in Cyprus as a precondition for the resumption of the negotiations in violation of pertinent US Security Council resolutions and the agreed UN framework for the settlement of the Cyprus problem. At the same time, Turkey has been tightening its grip over Turkish Cypriots, aiming at the Turkification and eventually the annexation of the occupied area of the Republic of Cyprus. The Greek Cypriot side remains focused on creating the conditions for the resumption of negotiations in accordance with international law, pertinent UN Security Council resolutions, and European principles and values the soonest possible. As if this was not enough, Cyprus continues to bear the consequences of disproportionate number of migrants channeled by Turkey on Turkish aviation flights through the occupied area and the UN-controlled buffer zone to the government-controlled areas to request asylum. Additionally, Turkey has recently announced new illegal drillings within Cyprus' exclusive economic zones. Turkey is invoking international law for Ukraine, while the very same country has been violating international law in Cyprus for 48 years now. Moreover, Turkey has not aligned with the collective sanctions against Russia. It is posing as a neutral mediator between Russia and Ukraine while shattering peace and stability in Eastern Mediterranean and the Aegean. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Our final speaker, Ms. Haraldsdóttir of Iceland.
Thank you. 4 months have passed since the Russian Federation launched its brutal and unjustified military aggression against Ukraine, a direct attack on our common values and our commitments. The Russian Federation continues to violate international humanities and human rights laws by indiscriminating targeting of civilians and civilian objects and infrastructure. Iceland continues to stand with Ukraine and promote the respect for international law and commitments, human rights, and fundamental freedoms and peace and security. We also attach great importance to the promotion and implementation of women, peace, and security agenda, which is more important than ever during times of war and crisis. I am therefore very happy to see reference to Security Council Resolution 1325 in the committee's resolution. While the active hostile takes an unspeakable toll on all civilians in Ukraine, it is evident that armed conflict and crisis have a unique impact on women and girls, which are faced with increasing threats of rape, exploitation, and trafficking. It is imperative that all international justice efforts address conflict-related sexual violence and other forms of gender-based violence committed by Russian troops. This is essential for women's rights in Ukraine, the whole OSCE region, and the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you, dear colleagues, for cooperating with the time limits, for excellent interventions today. I think this was an excellent debate. We are at our time limit, and so we will begin the consideration of amendments to the draft resolution at our next meeting, which will begin at 9 a.m. in the morning. And with that, we will stand in recess. Thank you.